What if the very system we trust to educate our children was never designed to liberate them, but to control them? Well, welcome to Humanitas Libertas. I'm the Socratic Voyager, and today we're diving deep into a topic that affects every family, every student, and every citizen. The public education system, its dark origins, and the hidden dangers of standardized testing. Before we begin, though, I need to ask you a question. When you think of education, what comes to mind? Is it intellectual growth, the pursuit of truth, the cultivation of wisdom and character, or is it bells ringing, students sitting in neat rows, and the anxiety of test preparation? The discrepancy between these visions reveals something profound about our educational system and the hidden forces that shaped it. So let's rewind to 19th century Prussia, which is modern-day Germany. The year is 1806, and Prussia has just suffered a devastating defeat at the hands of Napoleon's forces. The Prussian military analysts made a fascinating conclusion about their defeat. The problem wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. Their soldiers followed orders perfectly, but couldn't adapt when circumstances changed. Napoleon's troops, meanwhile, showed initiative and independent thinking. Prussia's response? If they couldn't conquer through military might, they would rebuild their society through education. But not education as we might imagine it. They developed the world's first national compulsory education system with a very specific purpose. Children would be removed from their families' influence during crucial developmental years and taught to obey institutional authority without question. Johann Gottlieb Fichte, a German philosopher and architect of this model, stated it plainly. The schools must fashion the person and fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will. So, think about that. Not education to empower independent thought, but to fashion a person who cannot will otherwise. This system featured age-segregated classrooms, standardized curricula, rigid scheduling, and bells signaling when to move, all enforced through a powerful, centralized bureaucracy. Within a generation, Prussia rebuilt its military might. Their education system had created exactly what they wanted: disciplined, obedient citizens who would follow orders without question. And this model became the blueprint for what we now call public education, not just in Prussia, but worldwide. So, in the late 1800s, America was transforming. The Industrial Revolution was creating unprecedented wealth and unprecedented challenges. Men like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan were building massive industries, and they needed something specific. A labor force that would be disciplined, punctual, and unquestioning. When American education reformers like Horace Mann visited Prussia in the 1840s, they weren't impressed by the learning or creativity that they saw. No, they were impressed by the order and the discipline. Mann's 7th annual report as Massachusetts Secretary of Education praised Prussian schools for their ability to maintain order and instill discipline, barely mentioning intellectual development. So, by 1852, Massachusetts passed the first mandatory attendance law in America. Despite fierce resistance from parents, particularly immigrants and farmers who recognized the threat to their cultural values and parental authority, similar laws spread across the nation within decades. The industrial titans saw an opportunity. Rockefeller's General Education Board, formed in 1903, directed millions towards shaping curriculum and training teachers, equivalent to billions in today's money. Rockefeller reportedly stated, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." That wasn't hyperbole. This system was never intended to create inventors or artists or leaders. It was designed to create a factory-ready citizen, orderly, compliant, and predictable. The parallels are striking: factory bells and school bells, assembly lines and classroom rows. Education became less about developing human potential and more about creating standardized workers. Elwood P. Kuberly, Dean of Stanford School of Education from 1917 to 1933, openly described schools as factories in which raw materials, children, are to be shaped and fashioned into products. The result? As G.K. Chesterton observed, we are producing a vast quantity of people who are able to read but unable to distinguish what is worth reading. But to make this system truly effective, they needed one more tool, a way to sort, label, and then control students throughout their educational journey. So now let's talk about standardized testing, which rose to prominence in the early 20th century, hand in hand with the American eugenics movement. Prominent education psychologists like Edward Thorndike, Lewis Terman, and Carl Brigham, creator of the SAT, believed intelligence was hereditary. More specifically, they believed that it was determined by race and social class. These early tests weren't neutral tools for measuring learning. They were explicitly designed to rank and sort children according to their supposed genetic worth. Look at these actual questions from early Stanford Binet tests. They don't measure intelligence, they measure cultural exposure, socioeconomic status. Carl Brigham stated in 1923, democracy means that people rule. Intelligence tests mean that the wisest rule. The consequences were devastating. Children deemed feeble-minded based on these tests were institutionalized or sterilized. Immigrants were denied entry into the country, and a pseudo-scientific justification for racial and class hierarchies was embedded in our educational system. The language has changed, but the sorting function remains. Studies consistently show that standardized test scores correlate more strongly with family income than with teacher quality, curriculum, or student potential. Even today, the legacy of these tests lingers. Numerous studies show standardized tests reflect wealth, environment, and access to resources far more than they reflect intelligence or ability. The question that we must ask: are we still using tests designed for sorting and exclusion rather than authentic assessments of learning? Today, standardized tests like the PSSAs and Keystones in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, the SATs and the ACTs, still dominate the educational landscape despite mountains of evidence showing the significant harm they cause to students, teachers, and the learning process itself. When test scores become the primary measure of success, only what's on the test matters. Subjects like history, social studies, music, art, and even hands-on science experiments are pushed to the margins or cut entirely because they're not part of the standardized test. This often results in a lopsided curriculum that sacrifices critical thinking, creativity, and cultural literacy for repetitive drills in math and reading. Standardized tests aren't just another quiz. You see, weeks of preparation, rigid protocols, and the message that these scores determine a child's academic worth or a teacher's job security, it all creates high pressure, and many students experience physical symptoms, headaches, stomach aches, sleep disruption. And for younger children, some as young as 8, the message is clear. This is the moment you prove your value. That's not education, folks. That's psychological conditioning. Standardized tests are built for standard minds, but real students are anything but. children with ADHD, dyslexia, autism, anxiety, or processing delays are placed at an inherent disadvantage. Even with accommodations, the format is often inaccessible. These students are told to compete on a playing field designed to ignore their challenges, and when they struggle, the system labels them as underperformers instead of recognizing its own failures. You see, teachers are trained professionals, many with advanced degrees, deep passion, and insight into how students actually learn. But in today's test-driven environment, their curriculum is dictated by pacing guides aligned to the test calendar. As one teacher recently said, "I have 3 to 4 days to teach each concept, whether the students get it or not. There's no room to slow down, go deeper, or adapt lessons based on the student interest or need. The teacher becomes less a mentor and more a manager of state mandates." In the modern classroom, students are often reduced to data points, percentiles, proficiency levels, growth charts. But children are not spreadsheets. They're thinkers, creators, dreamers, and question askers. The obsession with measurable outcomes has hollowed out what education is meant to be: the development of well-rounded human beings. And for those who opt out of testing, often due to religious beliefs or moral objections, the punishment is silence. You see, some districts place these students in the library for hours with no instruction, no engagement, no learning. And in some cases, administrators have admitted that this policy exists, in their own words, to discourage others from opting out. Guys, that's not education, that's coercion. Meanwhile, corporations like Pearson profit immensely. In a recent fiscal year, Pearson reported over $4 billion in education-related revenue, much of it from government contracts for testing, textbooks, and digital platforms. This is one of the most effective and insidious examples of corporate capture in American history. The problem goes even deeper than profits. In 2013, the Pearson Charitable Foundation faced a major investigation by the New York State Attorney General. The allegation that it had misused nonprofit assets to improperly influence state officials and promote Pearson's corporate interests, specifically the development and sale of curriculum materials aligned with the Common Core state standards. Forbes reported that the foundation had funded lavish trips and private meetings with policymakers, blurring the lines between charity and lobbying. And in the end, Pearson's foundation settled the case by paying $7.7 million. While they admitted no wrongdoing, of course, the message was clear. Powerful corporations were not just selling the tests, they were shaping the very policies that require them. This case is just one example of a much larger problem. When public education becomes a marketplace, our children become the product. When nonprofit arms are used to grease the wheels of policy, trust in the system evaporates, and education is no longer guided by what's best for students, but by what's best for the shareholders. A report by the Center for Media and Democracy revealed that 4 major testing corporations, Pearson Education, Educational Testing Services, or ETS, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, and McGraw-Hill collectively spent over $20 million on lobbying efforts from 2019 to 2014. These efforts aim to influence state and federal policies to favor mandated student assessment, fueling a nearly $2 billion annual testing industry. The College Board, responsible for the SAT and Advanced Placement exams, AP exams, has been scrutinized for its financial practices. Despite its non-profit status, the organization reported $140 million surplus in 2017. Additionally, its CEO received a compensation package exceeding $1 million annually. Critics argue that such financial practices highlight the profit-driven nature of standardized testing organization. The list goes on and on and on. Our children have simply become part of the bottom line. A parent recently said, "My child used to love learning. Now all she talks about is how she's bad at school and dreads going." She's 8 years old. When we measure the wrong things, we get the wrong results. We train students to perform, not to understand. We teach them to check boxes, not to ask questions. We prepare them for compliance, not for life. So, what would measuring the right things look like? Well, countries like Finland have shown us a better way. No high-stakes standardized testing, a curriculum based on trusting teachers, project-based learning, and student well-being, and guess what? Their students outperform ours in nearly every category. Finnish students have more recess, less homework, and no standardized testing until a single optional exam at age 18. Teachers are highly respected professionals with master's degree and significant autonomy. The focus is on learning, not on measuring. But even right here in America, alternatives exist. Schools that prioritize creativity, critical thinking, and student agency consistently produce not just strong academic outcomes, but engaged, curious citizens. In the US, models like Montessori and Acton Academy provide living proof that education can be different. At Acton, students choose their learning paths, engage in real-world projects, and develop entrepreneurial skills. These schools empower students with choice and accountability, not conformity. The core mission of Montessori education is to nurture the individual's potential for growth through a carefully prepared environment that fosters independence, self-directed learning, and a love for lifelong learning. It aims to develop the whole child intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically to become a self-confident, responsible, and contributing member of society. Do those values align with your experiences with our modern public education system? Well, as a person who went through public schooling, has children in the public school system, and am myself an educator, it hasn't been my personal experience. Children learn how to make good decisions by making decisions, not by following directions. Also, in York County, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, some districts have taken steps in this direction. Programs in York Suburban, Dallastown, and Central York have implemented personalized learning platforms that allow students to move at their own pace, build mastery, and engage deeply with subjects that they care about. Superintendent Emily Lenardi reports increased engagement, improved behavior, and fewer discipline issues, along with, of course, academic growth. So what's the solution? We have to reclaim local control, trust our educators, empower students, and abandon the outdated factory model. Education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity into it, or it becomes the practice of freedom, the means by which men and women deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world. Which version of education will we choose? If you're a parent, teacher, or a student, you are not powerless. The first step is asking questions. Why do we accept a system designed for 19th century factories? Why do we allow corporations and bureaucrats to determine how our children learn? Why do we measure success through tests designed for sorting rather than learning? The next step is action. Opting out of harmful testing. Speaking at school board meetings. Supporting teachers who prioritize authentic learning over test preparations. You see, Thomas Jefferson warned us, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. Our children deserve an education system designed for human flourishing, not industrial efficiency. They deserve to be treated as unique individuals with boundless potential, not standardized products to be measured and sorted. So, with all of that, folks, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If this resonated with you, hit subscribe and share this video, and join the conversation in the comments below. Let's continue asking hard questions and pushing for real answers. Until next time, guys, I'm the Socratic Voyager, and this is Humanitas Libertas, where we believe that education should liberate, not domesticate. The only true education comes through the stimulation of the child's powers by the demands of the social situations in which he finds himself. See you on the next one.